I was in danger of giving up on my dream of writing a book. And I went through a very confused and very discouraging time. And I would say that these words were sort of my rallying cry for myself. I told myself, it's not too late. It's never too late. And it really just helped me through that period. And I am passionate about sharing this message because I feel that so often we don't even get started. We just, for whatever, we think it's too late and we give up on ourselves. And so that's why I'm so passionate about sharing this message. And my intention for our time together today is for you to reignite a goal, a desire, a dream, however faint or distant it may seem at this moment. The year was 1949, and the communists were moving south, and they were getting very close to Shanghai. My father was already here in the US. He was here on a one-year research grant, and the time was coming to an end, and he was getting ready to go back to China. And my mom wrote to him and said, no, stay. She said, I will get the children and myself out. And there was my older sister, my younger brother, and myself. And it was a very chaotic and scary time. So many people were trying to leave Shanghai. People were going to Hong Kong, to Taiwan, some to Australia. And it was really thanks to my mom's determination and her courage, I would say her ingenuity, and yes, some gold coins, that we managed to escape on the last boat out of Shanghai. This was a small ship and it was badly overloaded, but we were among the lucky ones. The four of us had the top bunk so we could take turns sleeping, and we had a porthole so we could breathe some fresh air. And during the voyage, we got into a really bad storm, and everyone threw we had to throw our one little tiny suitcase overboard so the boat wouldn't capsize. And we thankfully made it safely to Hong Kong. And then from there, we eventually came here to the US to reunite with my dad. I grew up in Ohio, and I've always been very proud to say that I'm a Midwesterner. In thinking about today's talk, there were so many stories I wanted to share, but I finally chose 4, and I thought, I'll share these with you to illustrate some key points, and hopefully they will be helpful to you as well. Have you ever had a goal or dream and for some reason you just never got started? I think all of us have. There are all kinds of reasons. Life, day-to-day life gets in the way, and we just don't get started. My first key I'd like to share with you is that any time is a good time to begin. I started my career at the age of 36 because I started my family at the age of 21. I met my husband at the end of my freshman year, and we were married at the end of my sophomore year. He said to me, if I didn't marry him, he was going to go back to Hong Kong and I would never see him again. So it worked. And my son was born after my junior year. Needless to say, this made for a very, you could say, interesting, challenging senior year. But I made it through. It's truly amazing how much you can do when you're young and energetic. And when our son was 2.5, we moved to Asia. And for the next 15 years, we lived in 4 countries in Hong Kong. My daughter was born in Malaysia. And when I was 36, we were living in Hong Kong for the second time. And I was living the life of an expat wife. I maintained a very you could say, very full social calendar. We entertained a lot. In Asia, especially in those days, the social life was a very important part of the husband's position. And of course, I was active in nonprofit and charity. I played tennis, I played bridge, there were luncheons. You could say, not a bad life. And it wasn't. But there was a growing feeling that I've had that somehow there was more that I could do, more that I wanted to do. And I just had no one to talk about this. None of the wives of our friends worked. In fact, they would not have understood. And my husband didn't want to talk about this. He was not interested in talking about this. He thought I had the ideal job already. And so I thought, oh, what could I do? Here I was, 36. I had never worked full-time, and I just didn't even know where to start or how to get started. So I finally decided, okay, I have got to get started. That was for sure. And I decided, all right, why don't I try banking? I majored in economics in my undergraduate. In fact, I graduated with honors in economics, despite the fact I was a full-time mom. And I knew I was good with numbers. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give banking a try. And I still remember this interview I had with this middle-aged, mid-level bank manager. He had a lot of questions. And finally, the question that was burning on his mind, he said, Dinah, you're living a comfortable life. You certainly don't have to work. Why do you want a job? So, you know, he was totally perplexed and highly skeptical. I had to convince him that this was not a job. This was the start of my career. Happily, I got the job. I would say that my first job actually got off to kind of a rocky start. My boss, my direct boss, was this 20-something Chinese American who had recently graduated from Harvard Business School, and I was his first employee. I don't think he was expecting somebody like me. And I have to say, you know, we all hear of chemistry, so it was kind of not a great start, and I would say it was kind of a rocky relationship throughout. But we worked it, we managed to work through this, and soon after I joined the bank, I learned that if you're serious about banking as a career, you had to go through the 6-month training. It was a very rigorous full-time training program. The only thing is that you needed to be with the bank at least a year, usually 2 to 3 years. And I thought, a year? I'm not going to wait a year. So I kind of started, you could say, a little campaign on my own behalf. And finally, after a while, they said, okay, Dinah, you can start after you've been with the bank for 6 months, but you have to keep your job. You have to keep working. You know, everyone in that training, they were from the region. A couple of guys from Japan, a couple from Korea, Singapore. This was their full-time thing. They went to the training and they didn't work. But I said, okay, great, that's fine. So I went to training in the morning, I went to my job in the afternoon, I did my 3 to 4 hours of homework after dinner at night, and it wasn't the first time I did double duty, and I'm sure some of you can relate. I have found that if you're willing to do that, it does help you to move ahead faster. So I finished that program and got really good marks. And then soon after that, I was promoted, and I could leave that boss and have a new boss. My career, I would say, was going quite well. I had 2 positions, 2 promotions in 2 years. But at the same time, my marriage was unraveling. And in fact, it had been unraveling for several years, for a number of years. From the time we went overseas, my husband was in a regional responsibility, and he traveled a great deal of the time. And we just grew apart. And we came to realize we just had, I would say, different values. And I was really feeling suffocated. And I mean suffocated literally. I didn't even realize this. I don't even know when I realized it. But I could not take a full, deep breath. And I know I went to see some doctors, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. And it wasn't until one day, I don't know, a couple years after my divorce, I realized, wow, I could take a full deep breath. So that actually, I think, it was then that it really hit me that for many years I couldn't take a full deep breath. But it was really a very, very heartbreaking, I would say heart-wrenching, scary time for me. I was quite young when I got married. I never lived alone. And our son at the time was 17. He was here in the US in prep school, but our daughter was 13. And we decided to leave her in Hong Kong with her dad, because then she could stay in the same school and be in familiar surroundings. So it meant leaving my daughter. It would be an understatement to say, but it's certainly my dark night of the soul.